Everybody's welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton.
Slancha. And good day, whiskey brothers, sisters, and friends, and welcome to the Whiskey Book Club's first book of Season 7 with Ian Wisniewski. And he is the author of this book right here. And it's going to keep popping it up right there continually.
Thank
and
you.
The book, A Passion for Whiskey, How the Tiny Island of Islay Creates Malts That Captivate the World. And as always, I'm honored to have you, the viewer, with us here today as well. And really, where else would we delve so deeply into the subject of whiskey than here with the author right now? So my name's Dolph. I'm the Spirit of Edmonton on social media platforms, founder of the Whiskey Book Club, and your host this evening for our friends in the British Isles, London specifically, in Scotland, where we're talking about your lovely drink. For those new to the Whiskey Book Club, I'll explain a little bit of what we're about. It's a home base. It's a safe place for whiskey geeks that love to share a dram and a passion for reading, mostly about whiskey or whiskey-related activities. So this book, again, is the 33rd book I've reviewed on the Whiskey Book Club, and let's review. Ian has written several books, The Whiskey Dictionary, right here.
Yes.
And then various others. So Vodka, Discovering, Exploring, Enjoying, Classic Tequila, The Classic Whiskey Handbook, Classic Malt Whiskey, Party Drinks, Party Cocktails, and a few others, which he's going to mention. The Classic Whiskey Handbook, I have that here as well, but I'm going to continue. Doesn't matter. He's a contributor to Whiskey Magazine. I've got that right here, just one of them. And he's on most years, 23, 24, 25. We'll see him. Are you on 2026, Ian?
Yes, and it will be published in October.
In October. Well,
yeah, so
yes.
Not long to wait until the next edition.
No, excellent. And happy to have it because it's part of my Christmas stocking every year. He's also Whiskey Quarterly, the Malt Whiskey Handbook. He's a judge for various whiskey competitions. He also a professor at one point, which I'd like to talk about. He is not just a keeper of the quake, but a master of the quake. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Ian. That's a mouthful. Are there any points that you are particularly proud of that I skipped over? Because there is a lot to say.
No, thank you very much. No, you've been very thorough and very generous in your introduction.
Excellent. And maybe we could... No, I would like... Which books did I skip over? Because I was going by memory as I was hitting that, and I know I've missed a few.
I wrote a couple of travel books as well. One on Paris, one on the city of Krakow. My family's from Poland.
Yep.
So to go to Krakow, which is a beautiful, beautiful city, to research a travel guide was just amazing.
Fun. Excellent. And I wish I could have gone. I haven't been there yet. So we've been traveling Europe. We've been trying as much as possible. This summer, I'm a teacher, so it's always summer for me.
Right.
3 weeks in Scotland, and that was great. And a little bit of time in Islay, not enough. 3 days, and I think I could have done 3 weeks in Islay. I really would have loved to. But one last question. It says that you are also a producer. You've been on the air for certain things. Was it just for your time with the university where you were publishing on the air, or were you on the air for other things as well?
Do you mean on TV?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I've done some spirits features on TV.
And what was the university? Was it a university course, or was it a drinks university type place in London? And I'm thinking at least 10 years ago. Sorry.
I taught at INSEEC, INSEEC, for people who were studying at Bordeaux University. They were doing a master's in wine and spirit, the business of wine and spirit. And then as part of their course, they would come to London for a few months to focus on spirits, because then they could visit, gin distilleries particularly in London and in England, and then go up to Scotland to visit more whiskey distilleries.
Fun. And I saw a few on YouTube. So if people look up your name on YouTube, you'll see that. So a few of those available for people. Now, I've touched a bit on the history, your history with whiskey in the introduction, but I guess that you have a much longer history with the drink and potentially the whole industry, obviously. Can you tell us a little bit about the man behind the words and where you started?
Yeah,
please.
Of course. Delighted. Well, I was always very interested in food and drink. I used to cook with my parents and loved it if they gave a party, I always wanted to be the waiter and, serve drinks. And when I came to London, I wanted to continue my interest, but it never occurred to me that I could, make some kind of living out of the food and drink industry. But I eventually got a job for a drinks magazine, and I thought, why would I write about drink? Drink is for drinking. That's my that's my background and experience. Yeah. But within a few months, I found it absolutely fascinating, because I was covering various aspects of the industry. Is it possible to have a pan-European advertising campaign, for example, for your brand? And to what extent do you need to tailor it for the culture and history of individual countries? And then I wrote quite a lot about packaging design. And I suddenly thought, actually, this is all about people, really. The people who produce and the people who consume. And I thought, well, particularly, advertising, packaging, etc., it's all about working out the best way of attracting, a certain group of people. And I thought, well, to me, that's a form of, social psychology. And I thought, if it's about people, then fine, great. I found my place.
And your degree was in the arts, was it not?
Yes, English literature.
So perfect. Perfect job for you. And you know what, there's so many facets in the industry. You could have went in so many different areas at that point. So I'm glad you went in this area, which is great because of what we've learned from you and what we've gotten from you. But who knows, you could have been the Diageo's head of something at one point.
Something or other,
would have all went well. I'm going to start, as I usually do, with a quote, and you'll see that there's going to be a lot. So a lot of quotes. Please stick with me. So I focused on, and so this is about the book. This is what we wanted. So page one, I actually have 3 quotes from page one. I was very impressed with the introduction. I was just brought in right away. So let's do this.
Thank you.
I focused on certain details to evoke a sense of each distillery's individuality, together with some of the personalities who have shaped this, and the distillery managers who are the current custodians. And as the climate and topography of Islay play a formative role in the character of the malts, I also wanted to convey the character of the island. Page one. This is what you focused on, but was this your intent when you first started writing the book? Was this your idea? And is there something else you'd like us to think about while we're writing, or other people seeing this for the first time before they read the book maybe? What would you like them to focus on while reading?
Well, in fact, this was to focus on the distillery individuality and some of the distillery managers was from the beginning my focus. And then I realized that, Islay is such an extraordinary island and all the distilleries are so individual that I wanted to bring in then, the mythology of the island, the topography of the island, and really show how the malt whiskey is, really a product of the island. Peat is gathered on Islay. They use the local water, and inevitably, it just has a great sense of place. And if you think that I mean, I'm one of the people who believes in maritime character being present in a malt.
Okay.
So for me also, the sea air on Islay, entering the warehouses and entering the casks, and then, remaining discernible in the bottled whiskey. I thought, well, it's all there. And I remember when I first started writing about whiskey, I knew, absolutely nothing. And I started going to tastings. And I remember going to a tasting of Bowmore given by Jim McEwan, who, is an absolute legend in the industry.
Lucky.
I had no idea, who he was. He was, to me, a very nice host. So I was sitting at the table at the tasting with Michael Jackson, another great VIP of our whiskey world. And he was asking all sorts of questions, and I was sort of nodding along thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what he's referring to because I just didn't have the knowledge. So after the tasting, I went up to Jim and I said, thank you so much. I wish I could have been more involved, but I'm at a really early stage, but I'm very keen to learn. And he said, well, why don't you come to visit Bowmore? And I said, well, thank you. That would be great. And, I assumed that this would be a kind of future project. And then he said, well, I'm going to be there because he traveled all the time. I'm going to be there in 2 weeks' time. Why don't you come? So I said, yeah, great.
All right.
So he then, made all the arrangements for me to go up. I arrived. I was in a small press group of, I think there were 6 of us.
Okay.
We had a fantastic, 2 days at Bowmore, really, covering every detail of the production process. And then Jim said, by the way, I've booked a minibus and I've arranged appointments for you at every other distillery on Islay.
Thanks.
So, I mean, incredibly generous, because it's quite unusual, for a company to invite you and then also to give you a tour of all the other distilleries in the area. And so,
and he had the clout to do that too, right?
Yeah,
and so the respect and the love of everyone else there. So
yeah, everybody really respected and adored him. He was such a nice guy. So that's what made me think, well, for me, it was so personal right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And he was such a formative, he was a real mentor for me, because I could ring him up and, talk for half an hour, sometimes an hour at a time. And so I thought, well, I really want to pay tribute to Jim and also to all the other really generous people who have, spent time at times, an hour or a day if I'm visiting, just answering my endless questions of why this, why that, what difference does it make, and all the rest of it. So I thought I must pay tribute to these people. And on Islay, there've been a real range of characters amongst the distillery managers.
Yes.
Some much more sort of extrovert and flamboyant, and some very quiet and modest, but you get this same generosity of sharing knowledge with everybody.
And lovely people. And my time there, I did love it. And in the book, you talked about certain facets of life on the island. So their punctuality. You talked about the Islay wave, and I experienced that as I'm driving and waving. My wife said, "Don't be so enthusiastic," because I was doing this. Of course, it's like it's just this. It's not this. It's hi. No, it's this. And let's do another one. So this was quite poetic, I think. So Ian, right here. So our next quote starts with a lamplit. There we are. A lamplit street led me from Bowmore Distillery to a stone pier, and I did that same walk. It was a serene summer evening on Islay, the full moon casting a band of shimmering silver across the darkness of Lochindale. White and amber lights indicated the opposite shore. I raised a glass of Bowmore to toast this view and took a sip. soft, creamy, vanilla, and wafting smoke enchanted my palate. Then I was no longer aware of flavors or thoughts or even myself, just emotions creating an internal moment. And my moment was because I rented the Mashman's cottage, is when I snuck out the back, and it was probably 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night at Bowmore, and they were still working. There were still some cars there, but I went where I wasn't supposed to, and I was looking where you were in the same opposite direction. Fantastic feeling. Yeah. It was. So here's the highlight for me. So there was this just after it. This is the magnificence of malt whiskey. It transcends flavor and creates an experience, and it did. In that moment for you, in my moment from Bowmore, looking out as I was breaking the law because I wasn't supposed to be there, that kind of helped it too. It made it fun. But I agree wholeheartedly with you. But I noticed that you were alone in part of this book, and this is what hit me. I don't know why this thought came about, but one of the most common quips about whiskey is that it's best served in company. And I'm pretty sure I know the number or the answer to this, but should it always be a shared experience? Is it the best experience? Should it always be the shared experience? Because for you and me in this situation, it wasn't shared. My wife was, well, she was telling me not to stay out too long because she was back, and she went back because she didn't want me to continue. She's not a rule breaker. Right. But for you, does it have to be in a group? Is it better in a group? Better alone?
I think it's best not to plan it, but just sort of let it happen naturally. And, you know, sometimes you share the moment live with other people, or as we've just done now, you know, you share it retrospectively. So it's still sharing, even though we weren't there at the same time, but we can still share the same experience because we've both, you know, been on that particular spot and seen that view and had a dram at the same time. And I mean, sometimes also, you know, when you're with a group of friends having a dram and you have that transcendent moment, then you forget that your friends are with you because it's just, you know, something going on in your imagination and in your heart. So I think that you can be in a group or not in a group, regardless of who's around you. And, you know, there are also times when you feel at one just with, you know, people you know from the industry. They're not necessarily with you, but if you're drinking their malt whiskey, you can often feel their presence around, or you think of them as well as part of it.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
It depends on the situation, depends on the time, depends on the frame of mind, maybe.
Yes.
I particularly like being alone late at night. So if it's late at night for me, it's 11 o'clock. It's late for other people. For me, it's 11 o'clock in front of the fire. Things get quite cold here in Canada. So on those minus 25, minus 30 degree nights in front of the fire with my two puppies around me, there's nothing better than that in my mind. And I'm sipping, and it's usually either heavily sherried or heavily peated, and it just makes me happy.
Yes. And if you do have friends with you, then you can't talk about it as it's happening anyway.
No.
So it is then very nice to be able to sort of share it afterwards. Because it reminds me, I went to a wonderful tasting recently and I had a sip. And then the host came over to me and he said, "Oh, what do you think?" And I said, "Do you mind if I don't think just for a few minutes? Because I just want to feel it. You know, I don't want to analyze it. I just want that sort of emotional experience." And he said, "Oh, yeah. And then, you know, I started writing and did my sort of, you know, deconstruction of aroma, palette and finish. But at that moment, I just wanted to experience it without being analytical and, you know, putting my detective hat on and trying to work out, you know, where did that flavor come from and all the rest of it."
There's
sometimes thought gets in the way, don't you find?
It does. But and the fact that I have a little notebook where I'm probably taking the tasting notes at that point in time would probably encourage someone to come over and ask as well. But at that point, the notebook's not out. It's down and you're just enjoying it. And I can't tell you what percentage of the time I'm one or the other, but I do want to enjoy it without thinking. Without reminiscing over this flavor. I just want to have the feeling or the mood wash over you and just live in the moment, which I don't do often enough.
I mean, I think it is a fantastic way of being in the moment, and it's just now because that flavor either starts to evolve, or you swallow the malt whiskey and then you have the aftertaste, so you're only in that moment briefly, and the transience of that moment makes it all the more special. But do you ever tell your puppies what you're thinking? Do you ever say, hey boys, this is a delicious malt?
No, I don't. I'm just petting them, and they usually, if I bother them too much, they leave my lap and they go somewhere else. So I think I bother them as much. But my previous dog, also a smaller animal, in his older age, I would dip my finger or my pinky in the whiskey, and he'd have a sip, and then a different one. So we enjoyed that together quite a bit in his old age, the old guy. So that was great. Although I do remember, I read an article from you about you that one of your favorite memories was at the Kaigalaki Hotel, and you were, I don't know if it was snowed in or if there was a storm of some, and you had to stay an extra day there, and you said you loved it so much because you could just crawl upstairs afterwards. But that was a shared experience as well that stuck in your memory, I believe.
Yes, shared with about 20 other jubilant journalists.
Nice. That's great. And a great place for it. I loved it. I sat inside for a little bit, but I enjoyed it outside. There's 2 or 3 tables just out the balcony. I really enjoyed it. And I'd love to go back, and I was a little bit envious when I read that because I would have liked to have spent an extra day there specifically, and I didn't. But that's okay. Let's continue. And we're still this isn't really about the book yet. This is mostly about you, just getting to know you beforehand. But in the book, you assert that you're both a collector and a whiskey lover, which I am as well. So I was drawn into this. This is especially poignant in the current situation where collectors are not really well regarded. So I have to watch who I tell that I collect whiskey, because I love drinking whiskey, but I can't tell everybody that I'm a collector because they don't respect it, or they think that we raise the price of whiskey, or whatever reasons they want to give me. Do you often feel like you have to defend your collecting? And please tell us about the dilemma that we face in this situation. And you mention it on page 17. I don't know if you have the book or if you remember what I'm talking about. I can read it to you if you want.
No, I have discussed with friends and people that I meet at whiskey festivals, and one person said to me, "But whiskey is made to be drunk," which is the line that we're always chastised with. And I said, yes, that's absolutely true, but that's not the only way of enjoying whiskey, because if you're a collector, to possess something amazing in pristine condition with, the carton, the carrier bag, everything, the whole lot together, that also can give enormous pleasure. So, whiskey, you could say whiskey is supposed to be drunk, but you could also trump that and say whiskey is supposed to give pleasure. And the pleasure can be derived in various ways.
For me, it's the hunt as well, trying to find the bottle. And it's also an annoyance. I've been trying to find Edredor straight from the cask, Chateauneuf's Pap. I've been trying. It's got to be 6 years I've been trying to get this bottle. It's come at auction a few times, and I have friends looking for me because I generally don't do the auctions, but I have friends that love the auctions. I don't, because I buy too much.
Right.
I have no way of stopping myself when I want something. So it's a friend, and I give them a certain amount of money. That's my limit. And the 2 times that's come up in the past couple of years, I haven't found it. But I'm still there looking. And there's other collections where you might have 3 of the collection that came out, and you're looking for the 4th.
Yeah.
There was one from Brooke Laddie. I finally found that. So they did the golf, the lake series or the golf course series, and I finally got the one that was from Canada that they had. So, and these things, they make me happy because I had it. I don't know if I want to drink it or if I drink it all because it's the tin. I guess I could drink it, and it's really just the tin that people see that's displayed up there. But the hunt is important for me. Is the hunt fun for you, or the discovery someplace of something unique?
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Because, you know, when I go into a whiskey bar, then, you know, I have sort of X-ray eyes looking along the shelves to see, you know, what I am not familiar with.
Yeah.
And that's always really exciting. And also, you know, another aspect of collecting that perhaps people underestimate is that it's also a great pleasure to organize your collection and to display it, and, you know, to get the sort of aesthetics that you particularly want.
Yeah.
I mean, my friends laugh when I tell them all my whiskies are arranged in country order, A to Z. And then within Scotland, for example, it's by distillery name alphabetically. And then within each distillery section, it's, of course, numerically arranged, youngest to oldest.
Okay.
And then any which don't have an age statement, then the name is the beginning of me deciding how they go in alphabetical order.
And that's difficult when you find things, because I don't know where you're able to store your whiskeys for display. I have some that I've put in boxes and put away because I don't need to display them. One's for a reason, because I hate them anymore. And this was the Game of Thrones. Did you watch this series at all?
No, I don't.
I read the books, I watched the series, and I collected the bottles. They weren't supposed to be in Western Canada for a while, but I got them all. I got all the extra bottles. They were beautifully displayed for friends to come in, and the price was going up. And I've never sold bottles, but I do look at how the price was climbing, and it was about $3,500 for the collection. And then the very last show, I don't know if you've heard of it, but Bran the Brave was something. It was completely off from what most people who had read the book so far would believe would have happened, and it just plummeted, and the cost plummeted. And I was angry because of how the book ended, not so much about how the monetary value descended, but the book itself. I don't think George Martin would have wanted that at all. But they did it, and I was so angry I put it away. I haven't looked at them since. And I have friends that bug me about this because it was there, and they come downstairs and they look, and we have fun. And I told them about this, but it haunts me to this moment. But so like you, but my point being, and I don't know how I got on this, I'm sorry. But my point being, if you have a lot of cabinets around and you have a lot of room, then a new bottle puts everything in disarray, especially I think your system, because you would have to move this, and not just from one cabinet and encroach upon another cabinet, another square or something. I'm not sure. But that would be really difficult, because I have my cabinets divided into regions. Although I don't believe in regions and the tastings of them, but I do organize it in regions, which makes no sense. I'm sorry. And then shelves devoted to certain countries. And within the different countries, it's which ones are prettier up front, as opposed to your system, which makes more sense in finding it. And age-wise, that hasn't come into effect with me unless it's a certain bottle. So I'll have some Brooke Laddies, and I might do that, but I generally like the pretty bottles up front, and they have quite a few pretty bottles. So my arrangement is not nearly as specific as yours, but I think yours would pose a problem with you buy 5 new bottles. How are you reorganizing? That's a whole afternoon, Ian. I think, in my mind.
Exactly. It's with a mix of resentment and joy, because I don't want to have to, shunt a whole load of bottles to one side to make more room.
Yep.
And yet I want to accommodate the new bottles, because then the collection is so much more interesting. So it's a bit of a dilemma. But also, perhaps drinkers could give collectors some credit, because every now and again, a collector will want to, will have a slightly different focus, or want to buy a very expensive bottle. So then they might put some of their collection into an auction, to cash in and raise the money.
Yep.
So in that sense, collectors are making, difficult to find bottles available.
Yes. And I've done that for
another collector or a drinker is not our concern, but at least they are, available again. I mean, it is strange to think that some malt whiskies will probably never be drunk. They will just, kind of circulate from one collector to another.
The Black Bowmores, I don't know when that'll come up at one point. I'd love to taste it. Yeah. And if I had one in my collection, maybe at my 65th anniversary or some major step in my life, maybe I would do that. Yeah. But I do have bottles that have from the 70s and 80s that I've had in tastings, because I love doing the comparisons between the different, 10-year differences within whiskeys. And we'll get to this question later, because you address this in the book, and how the malts from different distilleries have changed over time. So we're thinking that it's just the distillers, like Bruichladdich, where one distiller has changed hands, and how are they making their whiskeys different from this? But it's the same stills, it's just the distiller. But really, it's the malt that's changing over time. But we'll talk about that. We'll get that, because I do want to. I want to wrap up the personal element for us before we delve really specifically the minutia of the book. And what I gleaned from the introduction when I first read it is, you're a whiskey lover, you're a researcher, you see monetary, social, and emotional value in whiskey. So monetary is there because we collect, and there's the potential of it, even though I've never sold anything, but we think in those terms possibly. Is there anything else we should know before we delve into the book about you? So when we're reading the book, we get a better understanding of it.
I think maybe just that I'm constantly learning and constantly motivated by learning more. So every time I go to visit a distillery, for example, I think, oh, fantastic. I've learned a whole load of new things that I didn't know before. And then when I think about those things, that raises more questions. And I think, okay, next distillery I go to, I can follow up on those questions. Right. And that's why, going to a distillery, some I've never visited, unfortunately, in Scotland, and some I've visited several times. But each time, if I've been several times, it's a different visit, because either, my knowledge has changed, or the distillery manager has changed, or, they've changed the fermentation times, or the spirit cut is a little bit different. So there are always things to follow up on.
How's your memory of the new make? Because there's several distilleries I visit in Alberta, and I'm pretty good at remembering the new make and the flavors with it. But how are you? You have so many more distilleries is what I'm thinking of, because I have probably 10 distilleries I go to fairly often. And I've been there 3 or 4 times each, and I've had the new make because I love the new make. And I can remember the new make, and possibly if it was different, and maybe I can't put my finger on it. Can you do that with the new makes from the different distilleries? because you do talk about new make.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think you have an appreciation of it as well.
I do. I think it's a real thrill to be able to taste the new make and think, this is the before, and then it'll go into the cask, and then eventually I'll be able to taste the after. Although sometimes, you get a great tasting from the cask while the aging process is ongoing. But to be honest, I don't taste the same new make from the same distilleries often enough to be able to do that. Because, at most tastings, it's quite rare to get a sample of the new make.
Yes.
It's only really if I visit that, that's always offered.
And they have to know you as well. Because I tried at Bowmore to get some new make. I couldn't do it. I have an inn at Brookladdy, so I have the new make from Brookladdy.
Nice.
And this new make is it's from 2015, so I can have, and the intent from that was to have the classic laddie, which will be 10 years old ish around that time right now that I get, and we would taste that compared to this, and what are the notes that disappeared, what notes were augmented because of the cask and the time. It's just a great conversation for those of us that want to get really, really, really geeky.
Yeah, absolutely. And also you think, well, what is in the new make that if we're tasting it at distillation strength is sort of hidden by the alcoholic strength? Because during the aging process, obviously the strength comes down and other things are revealed. And also it's interesting to think what is in the new make that will then interact with flavor compounds from the oak, oxidation, evaporation, and how will those original characteristics from the new make, how will they evolve? Because it's also interesting, how much of the new make character can you pick up or discern in the mature whiskey? Obviously, it depends on how influential the casks have been. But it'd be interesting, and how do you quantify that? But, then setting impossible experiments for ourselves is part of the joy.
It is. And then even if we do come up with the commonalities, is it because we know that it's the new make from this distillery, from this distiller? So Adam's done this one, and
exactly.
So
is the apple note that you pick up in the new make, is the apple note in the mature malt, is that, a direct descendant of the new make, or has it been created by other compounds, reacting together and then being oxidized?
Yep. So much to know, so much to do. And within that tasting, we'll inevitably come up with the thought that we can't tell. And that there's just so many other factors that we want to do. And within tastings, there's so much you can do. Different woods, different times, different, if it's the same distiller, same distillery. Where was it? And this is more with bourbon than with us, because, well, in Scotland, they look like this, whereas, or that. Whereas with bourbon, it's not quite the same whatsoever, is it? So let's get rid of the picture. Sorry, I don't want to have that in front of us the whole time. That mug, that's the person we want to be talking to. Let's go back to the barley question, because that was really exciting for me. So pertaining to barley, development of new varieties over the years, and you talk to this in the book. And later we'll talk about the things that I read that I think I should have known already. This is one that I think I should have known, but never considered it. Knowing that there's new varieties of grain out there, of barley specifically. And you talk about the process of, well, actually, I don't want to give too much away because I want people to buy the book. But could you talk in just a little bit about the process of a distillery to why they would want to change barley strains? There's reasons for it, and how they do that. Just a little bit.
Sure.
And they'll find out. But
One reason is a greater yield of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Another reason can be flavour benefits
Mm-hmm.
from the barley. And another reason for changing is because the barley varieties have their own life cycle. So, a barley variety might only last on the market for 5 years or so, and then it's no longer being cultivated by farmers. So you have to move on to another variety because it's just not available anymore.
Yeah.
It's a tough, competitive world. And, everyone's looking for the best outcome. The farmer wants varieties that are more reliable and, less prone to disease, that will give the farmer a better yield per acre. The distillers, not all, of course, but, some distillers are more concerned by the yield of alcohol per ton. Some are more concerned about the sort of the processability and how easy it or not easy it is to process the barley. So there are, and it's not a question that, some distilleries are only focused on one aspect. It's the whole package together.
And how did this information present itself? Were you writing an article on it? Is this research, or did it come up within your interviews with the distillers that they have changed from this year to the next? So, or is it casually reading other whiskey books that I haven't read about? Maybe they talked about it and it got you on this front.
Well, I was very interested from years ago when the McEwan was promoting the fact that they used Golden Promise.
Okay.
And I thought, so, what's going on here? And so then I started exploring barley varieties.
Okay.
And then I spoke to some farmers and to some commercial maltsters. And this was about 20 odd years ago.
Okay.
And so ever since I got, a sort of basic understanding of how the whole thing works, then every year or two, I try to write an article about barley varieties so that I can just update myself and see, what are the latest varieties, because there is there's an approved list, a list of approved varieties announced every year. How they're doing, which variety has the greatest market share, and why are distillers ordering that variety, what are the benefits. So it's always moving forward.
Were any of those articles in Malt Whiskey Yearbook?
I think they were, but they're also in Whiskey Magazine. I wrote about varieties and commercial maltsters and, the different ways of malting, floor malting versus, automated commercial maltings.
Okay. All right. And, well, speaking of other books, I should do this really quickly because I wanted to pay tribute to this. Have you had conversations with Mike Billett in relation to your Peat research? Because we talked about that, but the Peat specifically, just because that book came out and we did our time on here. And I just wanted to give him a plug because it's informative, entertaining. And if you haven't had that book, you should. Now, did you speak to him directly? Because he's pretty active out there. He likes to speak with other authors as well. He enjoys.
We spoke, but only after our books had been published.
Oh, okay. Were you at the same event, maybe, trying to...
Well, it wasn't deliberate. I wasn't trying to avoid him.
Sure.
I didn't realize that he was writing his book. And also, I generally don't read other whiskey books, not because I wouldn't find them interesting, but when I've got a project of my own, I'm really worried that if I read somebody else's, I'm going to be very influenced by the angles that they've followed up on. And should I follow those or shouldn't I, etc. And then before you know it, it's an absolute nightmare of, sort of scheduling your own book. So that's why I like to decide what I'm going to do, and then I talk to distillers, farmers, commercial maltsters, all the people involved in actually, producing what's needed.
Mhm.
And then at the end of a book, once it's gone, then I like to read other people's books.
Okay. And see what you missed, maybe, or what you could have, because it would lead to other questions, I think.
Yeah.
If I was doing that, and maybe it would get you off kilter. Off.
Absolutely. Because I always do quite a detailed blueprint of the book. I mean, for a publisher, the proposal is initially 1 page of A4. Okay. And then if they're interested, then, it's several pages where you go into more detail. And then I start to sort of lay out, if they commission it, then have a more detailed blueprint. And, I've plotted everything the way at that moment I would like it to be. So, at that stage, I really don't want any other influences apart from perhaps a distiller or a farmer saying to me, but, I've just done this. Are you interested?
Okay. All right. Do authors get together very often where you are? Are you at one point, and I mentioned Davin's name previously, but he said there was a point in time where the distilleries and Diageo or whoever it might be, not just distilleries, would invite authors, and they would have a group of 16 on a gambit doing something. Have you been to these anytime recently? Is this something that's still happening?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and thank goodness, because press trips are a fantastic opportunity to meet other people, writing about whiskey, and also then to get to a distillery and ask questions, view the production process, because it's great talking to somebody on the phone, but, when you actually see the equipment and you feel the environment, then there are always additional questions.
Yes.
So it's fantastic to visit on the spot.
Well, you'd assume that you're a thoughtful lot, that you think about what you're doing, and then one thing lending to more and more and more questions. I think they could bring you there and say nothing and have one person in the room just for questions, and just one question would start, and I think it would lead to hundreds.
Yeah,
over hours, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm getting back into I should have known this category, and I'm going to read, I think, 6 or 7 things. And as I read them, if you could think about it, this for me, was there any of these that surprised you prior to you actually writing it? And did you not know it? Did you know a little bit about it? Did you go into more detail because of conversations you had with distillers or farmers? Anyway, here's the list, if I can do it.
Sure.
So here's the first. The microfile of the grain is the only entry point of water, as the outer layers of the grain are waterproof. I should have known that, and I probably did, but I haven't thought about it for a while. And the kiln operator assembles a range of drier and wetter peat, as well as different layers and this is the part, the layers and sizes of peat to control the fire. And I just thought it was air, no air in my opinion. That's what I thought. Isla's cows. Am I there? No. Sorry. I want Isla's cows. That's the one there. Right there. Sorry. Isla's cows have good appetite for these peaty pellets, but their counterparts on the mainland do not. Consequently, pellets for mainland cows are sweetened with molasses. I didn't know that at all. I can't say I ever knew that, but it's really neat. Fortunately, other Islay distilleries united to stave the maltings by signing the Concordat of Islay distillers in 1987. Every Islay distillery was then operational. everyone that was operational at the time signed this. Together with the Isle of Jura distillery on neighboring Jura, pledged to take at least a percentage of its malt from Bordeaux and maltings. And I didn't want to go on and on and on. I think I have probably 10 in here that I was thinking about, but this is the beginning of the book. And again, we're enticing people to want to buy the book, so you should buy the book. But tell us, was there any of these that maybe surprised you in learning it, and that's when it came into the book?
All those things I had covered before, but wanted to.
Cows? Even the cows. I didn't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you didn't want to. Sorry, I cut you off.
Because I write everything down, everything, because I never want to, rely on my memory. So I had a lot of interviews in my files, and when you write an article, sometimes you only use, say, 50%, of the material you've researched, just because it doesn't quite fit, or the word count, or whatever it is. So I went back and looked through all my notes on Islay from, previous visits. And that was also, a great head start in my research for the book. But as I would never, ever write a book purely based on what I already know, I always take those things with me. And then I want to go to the next level, from my existing knowledge, because otherwise I feel that I would be betraying the reader. If I'm just going to sit at my desk for a few months writing, then I don't think I've done my job. I need to be up there on the road, interviewing, researching, collecting as much new material as possible. And also there were, I'd been to Islay fairly often, but on one of my research trips, I saw the new the new still house at Ardbeg.
Okay.
So if I hadn't been there, I would, I got the press release, but the press release didn't tell me how stunning the rivet work is on the stills. You know what I mean? So all the details that you personally respond to, you only get those when you actually visit in person. And I think that then for the reader, you can be a bit like, a camera, and just provide these glimpses of details that you won't see necessarily on the website or in a brochure.
Okay. That makes sense. You're doing the research, you have your background knowledge, and then you're adding to it. And then you're giving it to us, which is very nice of you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Pleasure. Well, I love the research part of it. To me, it's so exciting to just keep asking why, and questions, and one question leads on to another. And then, trying to get a nice, interesting package of material out of all the sources that I've had. And the more sources you have, always the better the story.
I agree. More depth, really. Yeah. Talking about research, let's talk about the section pertaining to flavor compounds being soluble in water, alcohol, levels of alcohol. I found that really interesting, how certain ones come out at different points, and it makes sense. We've all tested or had our whiskey with water, without water, with 50% water. We've done that to see the differences. So the water makes sense to those of us geeky enough to destroy your whiskey with 50% water. But knowing the different alcohol levels that it comes out, it's not alcohol levels because of the water. It's where it's distilled and the alcohol flavors coming out. Now, I've talked to Dr. Don Livermore here from JP Wiser's, and he's talked to us about that as well, how these flavors come out at this percentage or at this temperature. This is great. But this is really interesting how you did it. And I'm wondering where you got the information. So again, is it directly from distillers, or is this research into Harriet Watt, where you're getting their gigantic textbooks and you're looking into the information there. So where's this information coming from?
No, it's from distillers, and in fact, I've from my previous book, The Whiskey Dictionary, I spoke to Don Livermore, and he's a tremendous authority. So we had fantastic discussions, and yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, and I'm still asked by people, is it okay to add water? So in a way, you know, we've got people who are consumers who are fantastically knowledgeable, and people who want to drink whiskey but still feel uncertain, you know, about sort of how to drink it. So I always say, of course, you know, you should drink it exactly how you like it. And one great way of doing that is to, you know, line up the same style of glassware, fill each glass with the same amount of whiskey, try the first one neat, add a large drop of water to the first glass, 2 drops to the second glass, 3 drops to the third glass, and then just see how you get on, you know, with each variation, and just discover, you know, how the flavor changes
over time. And I think that would be great as long as your group is into, you have to find a group that wants to do that.
Yeah.
We have friends. You have friends that would do this. I have friends that this is not a tasting for 50 people in a room that are not feeling especially geeky about water. And would it make a difference, do you think, if you had hard water, soft water, distilled water? Could we do it with 9? We'd have 9 quarter-ounce Glencairns, or I think you like the tulip shape with the stems. So
I do.
I like warming it up in my hand and seeing the difference with the heat. I think you stay away from that. But having the 3, so 1 cast strength, because I generally like cast strength, and then the next one beside it 2 drops, and the next one 4 drops, and then the one behind that with hard water, with distilled water, or water from the distillery, even though that I know it's a gimmick, but it still might be fun for a tasting. Would you be able to tell the difference right away with the 2 and then the 4? Is your palate adept enough to do that right away? Or do you have to think about it quite a bit? Because I think I would need a little bit more time. And what I mean by more time is probably 15 minutes to a half an hour with all 3 in front of me and just nosing them without tasting. Tastings don't usually go like that with me. They go a little bit faster. Do you think you could that quickly?
If there's a difference in the alcoholic strength, then I think I would.
Okay, good.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell you what kind of water was used, definitely. But I could tell you, I could tell you that there's a difference. I mean, it might be difficult to define what the difference is, but just in terms of, you know, the weight would be on your palate would be slightly different, and then the flavor profile would be slightly or sometimes significantly different, even with a couple of drops.
Okay. And do you let the whiskey rest a little bit before your tastings? I saw an interview with you with another gentleman, and you were talking about tastings. It was about an hour-long video on YouTube, and I thought it was great. Although I did have one question, and the one question, and you just referred to it now, was the quantity being the same. And I'm wondering how a quarter ounce compared to a half ounce or an ounce of whiskey would make a difference in the glass if we're not warming it up, if it's in stemware that we're grabbing from the stem. I'm wondering if it was a heat-related question or something completely different, I guess.
Yeah, well, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is that the headspace in the glass would be different with each quantity of whiskey.
Okay.
So how that affects the aroma delivery and the palate delivery would be very interesting and a great experiment to do. And thank you. That's on my list now for experimentation. I mean, another tremendous experiment is to add the same amount of whiskey, the same whiskey, to glassware of different shapes and styles. And what an amazing difference that makes.
And I've done that. And I have to compliment the wine industry for this more than anyone else, because it was another festival, and it was an individual from Riddell. So Riddell stemware, and we had 4 different types of wines in 4 different types of glasses, and how one was exemplified and the best for a certain type of wine. And I never thought in terms like that before. And this it's probably 10 years ago, maybe 12. I don't know. It was a while ago, but it started things thinking a bit. I was never a rocks glass whiskey kind of guy. I always liked, I think they were sherry glasses at first. I always wanted small amounts, and this goes back 20 years or so. I wasn't using Glencairns for probably maybe 15 years ago, but when I started, it was small amounts, and the headspace made sense. And then I noticed that wine glasses were better way back when as well, and the ones they weren't especially tulip shaped at the time. And then when these came out, I started getting other stemware, and we have too many now. I have weight. That's another thing I've collected over time, but it's worked out well within the tastings because it does show you how it makes a big difference. So you're saying the headspace is, I don't know if it would work for me unless I left it on the table, because I'm always doing that. So that's going to change the headspace, and often I blow if it's cask strength, and we're used to alcohol, and other people are not so much to the 50 and 60% alcohol. So it's not really a good idea for everyone to be doing that, but I do. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Sure.
We're going to stick with tasting whiskey specifically. So let's throw up a quote. Here we go. There we are. So even before inhaling or sampling a malt whiskey, the brain is already evaluating visual information. And then you say, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't be judging a malt whiskey against my expectations only on the flavor profile. This is why I try to prevent my brain from conducting any detective work before I begin a tasting.
Yes.
And I'm going to say that's hard. I'm wondering if you can disassociate yourself from the preconceived notions. So this is difficult when you're buying the whiskey, when you're pouring the whiskey. Even harder if you know a lot about the distillery or aspects of the bottle, the percentage, the age, the wood, the time. It's really hard to get that out of your mind. So maybe this is situational to when you're in the role of judge, because you don't see it. It just presents itself, or someone presents it. They put it in front of you. So I'm wondering if you can do it on your own, or like me, you ask your friend, significant other, in my case, to pour me something blind, and I do that. And my wife does that for me often enough, which I appreciate. But it's still not objective, because I know which bottles I have open. I've got about 150, 200 bottles open, but I still know what they are. So I can bring it down to a small amount. If my wife started opening the other bottles, which would be fine, but she doesn't want to. If she started opening the other bottles, it'd be harder, but I still know which bottles are in my collection. So can you do this with your collection, or do you need someone to help you out with it? And can you maybe only do this as a judge? What's all those questions for you, sir?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. When you're judging and somebody is just bringing you a lot of samples all in the same glassware, that is absolutely perfect. And, perhaps all you know is that you're tasting 12-year-olds or 18-year-olds to give you some context for judging them.
Okay.
But usually, when I'm tasting at home, I am my own assistant. So I'm pouring them, and then I just do my best to concentrate on, if I pour out the samples and then I push the bottles to one side, and then I try very hard to forget. And I also deliberately don't linger on the labels. If the best thing is if I just get a small sample bottle with just a sticky label, sometimes handwritten what it is. That's perfect, because then I don't know the retail price, which again would, if you know that it costs £100 or 10,000, inevitably that's going to affect the way you feel about it.
I don't have to worry about the £10,000. It hasn't come across my palate yet, but I'm
not buying whiskey of that thing, but just if I'm sent some samples, to judge, because sometimes you judge on location, right, where you just sit and everything is brought to you, and some competitions send you bottles or samples to your home, and then you do the tasting remotely. So I just try not to focus on anything at all. And I like silence in the kitchen and just concentrate on the aromas and flavors. I just briefly look at the color. But again, I don't want the color to influence me, because, inevitably you think if it's dark, you think you're expecting it to be richer. And then again, if it isn't, you might be disappointed, but that's disappointment against expectation.
Yes.
Also, I think it's very important to draw a line between nose and palate, because again, the nose sets up certain expectations. So I try and treat nose and palate very much as two separate events, and then only afterwards think how they relate to each other. So if I've got a flight of several malts, then I'll do the nose of each of them and write my notes. And then I'll go back and do the palate, because I don't want the nose to create any kind of active expectations, because again, that's going to potentially influence my judgment.
Then when you're doing it that way, or with that thought in mind, it would be hard to see if they're different, because I tend to like it when a whiskey has a nose and a palate that are a little bit disjointed. Not always, but I do like it when I'm surprised. Let's say that. I like being surprised.
Yeah.
And when you're doing it that way, do you still get that surprise if you're going through 1 to 8 or 1 to 6 or whatever you do for judging, and then the palate 1 to 6? Do you still get that element of surprise?
Because I do have a very brief nosing before I take the palate, just to try and tune it in. But I try very much to treat them as separate events.
Okay. I do as well. There's a link, but there's a distinctive when you talk about the nose and the palate and the finish. These are 3 very different things for me.
Yes.
And sometimes one can be fantastic and the other 2 not, or 2 fantastic and 1 not, or you're let down by something. But yes. So good for you. You're able to disassociate yourself from the knowledge at the point and time of your note-taking and your analysis. I have a hard time with that, so good for you.
I do that as much as possible, but it can't be 100%, unfortunately.
How often do you judge events? So have you, because I saw that this year you were in Islay, but are you invited to the festivals on a judging basis often? Because you've done the Space Side. I don't know if you've done the Spirit of, or the Islay, Fish Islay. Have you ever done that, or tasting or judging there?
No, I haven't.
No? Okay. And what are the other ones that you have done?
Spirit of Space Side.
No.
World Drinks Awards, World Whisky Awards, the Spirit Business magazine. They have a series called the Spirit Masters.
Okay.
So I've done that. And then...
Have you gotten free trips out of it do they bring you places that are interesting that you can, because I think 3 of them are in London that you mentioned, are they not? So,
Yes. And World Whisky Awards is usually in Norwich.
okay. All right. So,
which is a nice city, and it's not that long on the train, which is also good.
nice. Well, I was hoping they'd bring you to Amsterdam, that you would go to Japan for something, and maybe to the United States and certain places, New York, or here in Canada, in Toronto, we've got ours and things. It's just, I'm hoping for you that you get to travel a lot within this role on someone else's dime, which
Thank
is
you very much.
I'm hoping. But
thank you. I have that hope too.
Let's keep talking about malt whiskies. So, and I have another quote. Boop. What a malt whiskey has to offer depends on the characteristics we're able to perceive from it. Each of us may pick up the same or similar or different characteristics from the same malt whiskey. Page 66. Mm-hmm. So this is one of my favorite parts of hosting tastings. And at one point, I was biting my tongue when someone suggested something that was vastly different from me. And I was thinking, oh, no, you're kind of wrong. That's the thought that was in my head. But now I believe that people do taste something vastly different. And it's 10 years of hosting the taste, more than that, a long time of hosting them, and me finally coming to the decision that a lot of people have better palates than I do. I learned that from comparing my palate to my wife earlier on, that there's people that have better palates than me right away, but that it's based on certain things, and it's not just the physical, and then the emotional comes into play. So this is great, and it's entertaining at tastings where we want divergent thoughts and to bring out the conversations, but it's probably not so valued when you're a judge. So tell me, please, in which ways do you think whiskey does change people's perceptions? This is a big question. I'm sorry. Pick whatever you want from a small bit, because it could be anything in their world. They smell orange and they had a great childhood with oranges all around them. I don't know. But what do you think most convinces us of our enjoyment of whiskey? Can we not enjoy a whiskey and think there's nice part? I'm completely lost on this. This is too much of a question. This is a big question. Let's stick with this. As a judge, and I'll think of this as you're doing this. As a judge, how do you disassociate yourself from your past to be as objective as possible? Is it possible for you? And is it possible for most people, do you think? And I'll get the other one in line from my head as you're talking.
I think it's a fascinating question, because on the one hand, people invite judges based on, their particular skill, experience, etc. of tasting. But that inevitably includes varying sensitivities to different flavor groups. So, typically, for example, people who can pick up cork taint, from a bottle from some wine, would be considered to be great tasters because, they can pick it up. And yet some people are totally insensitive to that, to the, compound, to the smell of cork taint. So they would be considered not a good taster, because somebody would say, oh my God, we can't drink this, it's corked. And someone else would say, I don't think so. And the conclusion would be that the person who picked up the cork taint is a great taster and the other person is not. But that's because they can have varying sensitivities.
Right.
I mean, I'm particularly sensitive to sulfur compounds and citrus. With citrus,
sulfur you like, and citrus you like, or
I love
sulfur
citrus.
And sulfur you don't.
But even a hint of that sort of struck match sulfur is quite overwhelming for my for my sensibility.
I can pick it up very easily,
Yeah.
better than my wife, but I
Yeah.
like it. That's the
okay.
difference. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, we see that this is a great example. We're both sensitive to it. For you, it's enjoyable. For me, it's just overwhelming, and it's absolutely at the forefront, and I resent it because it's too dominant.
Okay.
Similarly, I don't like strong oak because, again, to me, it just kills the rest of the flavors. So if I have a sample with strong struck match notes,
Mhm.
I do think to myself, remember, you are very sensitive. So I'm not going to, I'm not going to take away a significant number of marks for that.
Based on it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I've come up with my question. I'm just going to leave it broad. You speak to the link between feelings and previous tasting experiences. Can you expand on this instead of me saying all that? That's what I'm trying to get at. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I mean, I think initially when people start tasting, they can pick up various notes, but perhaps the difficulty really is to define them and articulate them. They can feel flavors, but it's difficult to articulate. And when I was beginning, and I went to a lot of tastings given by master blenders, and they would say, oh, well, here I've got vanilla, this, that, and the other. And so I would always try and look for those flavors. Again, the risk is power of suggestion, but that's another matter. And I would just think, well, can I find those flavors? And if not, then I'll try not to worry. It doesn't mean I'm a deficient taster. It just means that, I have a different range of sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
But I then began to build up a broad framework of things to look for. And that was really, really useful because for a while, I would have a kind of conscious checklist to go through while I was becoming more experienced. And
I think that's important, though, because you have this range of emotions and tastes. I think you need to narrow this down. I don't know if you need it to anymore, and I don't always need to. But if I'm bombarded, if I'm confused with the flavors, I go back to that list.
Yeah,
I'm the same way. But for me, it always started with sweet, and what type of sweetness was it? And then for me, after the sweetness, it was the wood, because one led to the other in my mind. So that was my production and my step. Do you still do that? Do you still go back to it or not?
I mean, depending on the challenge, because with a malt whiskey where you have an individual sequence of notes and it, evolves and unfolds, it's much easier then, to focus on microseconds of the flavor profile as it unfolds. But some whiskies have such integrated, interlocked flavors that it's more of a sort of community of flavors, and it can be really difficult to then pick out individual notes. So when I've got a really integrated whiskey, then I start to think, as you mentioned, okay, well, where am I getting sweetness, and what kind of sweetness? And there's a little bit of freshness. So is that zesty lemon, or is it something else?
Yeah.
And then just try and get closer and closer. And funnily enough, one reason why I don't like diluting is that I usually find that when I dilute a malt, then the flavors become more integrated. I find that usually at bottle strength, for my palate, it's much more usual that there's an individual sequence of flavors.
Okay.
I mean, also just to prove that I'm not a dictator or set in my ways. I always taste neat, and then I add a drop of water just to prove that the neat version is better for my palate.
For me, I will do the water drop from time to time, but if I'm completely confused about something for whatever reason, I do water it down to 50% and I destroy it, which is horrible. But because I'm just, there's something there, I can't get it. And that's when the water comes out, and then I inevitably find the flavor that I'm looking for. But then I'm left with an undrinkable whiskey, which is a shame.
Yeah,
it truly is. Let's talk about tasting notes a little bit more. So a tasting note can be instinctive and simply state a verdict. I love it, which I like. But it's interesting to say why, for the benefit of others or just for yourself. And you go, that's in page 68. And when do you think that the average malt whiskey drinker goes from one to the other? Because I know I didn't start thinking I'm going to pick out the notes in this whiskey when I started. And for me, it was the regional malt series. And I think you mentioned this as well. So the regional malts it was Diageo, and it was my son had just been born, 1994. So I'd had whiskey, and I'm from Alberta, so we have rye whiskey, lots of rye whiskeys, but the intent was to drink and have fun with people. I was very young at the time. But I wanted to become more discerning. The regional malts was my wife's gift to me the winter of my son's birth. And I came out, I liked Dalwhinnie the most, but decided that Oban should be my choice that I would work on for whatever reason, because I think Dalwhinnie was too light of floral. And I wanted something a little bit more complex and harder to think about.
Right.
But I didn't. I went through them, and it was just, I like it, I dislike it. I like it, I dislike it. It wasn't for specific notes. When does a person go from loving something and just happy with it to wanting to know the components that make it up? And maybe it's never. But do you have a general statement, a general thought when someone would?
I think the only statement I could make is that everyone's going to have their own schedule of when and how that happens. And, it may not happen, and that doesn't really matter. As long as somebody is enjoying it, then that's absolutely fine. The whiskey has done its job. And, then for some of us, the great joy is also being able to analyze and deconstruct, and also to compare and contrast with the people that you're tasting with, to see what they are picking up from the whiskey.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and we all want the reciprocal reaction. When we're in a group of people, you want something. I have to stop myself from wanting people to do that, I think, because I want friends, and they might not be whiskey or Scotch lovers, but I bring them over and I give them something special and smooth. I like it. It's like, give me more. But I have to stop, because that's their enjoyment. That's where they are, and there's no reason to become snobby or condescending at any point in time, because maybe they love something that I just don't care about. It's a pretty puppy. It might come up, and they might know everything about certain dog breeds, and I don't know anything. So we have to be nice to each other. And
absolutely, yes. I mean, when I give tastings, then my initial question is, did anybody like it or not like it? And please don't be worried if you didn't like it. And then, the hands go up. And then I say, well, would anybody like to say what they liked about it? And just, get some, and some people might say, oh, it was very smooth. And, that's fine. But it's the beginning of a sort of kind of deeper relationship with the whiskey, even just saying that.
And we're there to help people get a deeper relationship, I think. I'm a teacher. It's innate with me, and it seems like it's innate within you. If you're doing a lot of tastings, you want people to appreciate, and you want people to learn
Yeah.
and like something. It's
Yes.
not always just selling something for a group, because I don't do that very often. But every once in a while, I'll have someone come and we'll talk about that one whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go on. Vocabulary. Let's talk about vocabulary.
Okay.
You mentioned how the vocabulary of tasting notes has become far more detailed and extensive in the past 20 years. And it's because people are becoming more analytical. And I just wanted to ask you a question about the SMWS, so the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. I don't know if you're a member or you have been, but I credit them for a huge promotion of this within whiskey education development. And I can reach behind me and I can pull out their outturn, and just the descriptions that they give the whiskeys within each outturn is terribly impressive. And I told my wife that I would leave my job in a second if they asked me to come write for them. I would. I'd leave it all, because it would be so much fun.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if this was your reality in promoting it, and if it's not the SMWS that promoted this analytical part, or maybe it was just your very first job that did that. I'm wondering if you have a group of friends with whom you like tasting more because the enjoyment factor of just being with friends and these specific people, or because they have fantastic palates and you trust them. Do you have a group that you can kind of rely on?
Yeah, I mean, what I really love about judging is once we've scored and written our tasting notes, and then we discuss, and then to discuss with people who are experienced and enjoy analyzing. It really is a great pleasure, because then you get different perspectives around the table. And it's just fascinating that, something which had lovely sweetness for me might have been far too little sweetness for somebody else. So again, it just highlights how individual all our palates are.
And too sweet for me, because I don't like the sweetness at all. Well, I don't know. We'll see. If we ever had a whiskey side by side, we'd experiment with this a little bit, which is good. Okay, so you do have the groups, and it's mostly through judging that you have these specific people. You don't have an inner sanctum around you that don't judge.
I have friends who enjoy whiskey.
Okay.
And once I've done my tasting note, then quite often I give them the rest of the bottle. Okay. Because, I've done my tasting note, that's it.
Okay.
Let them enjoy it. And then they always ask me to tell them what I found in it, which is very flattering. But then I'm more interested in how they describe it, because they're not professionals. They're whiskey lovers, but they haven't been on any courses or anything like that. So it's really interesting to see how they describe it. And I think that the huge growth of interest in wine in the UK, in the sort of 90s in particular, made people far more aware of the flavors that you could pick up in an alcoholic drink and the way that they could be expressed.
Okay. Good. I'm happy. And I do that because I do have a group of people that will tell me if they think I'm wrong, which is nice. And people who will tell me I'm always wrong, which is kind of nice too, because I like to have the whole gambit. And I do a lot of tastings, and it's for fun. It's meant to be for fun, but it's educational. And it's fun to have these individuals in your group as you're having, let's say, 20 around the table. And it takes you down a little bit. It's like, oh, he says this, but he no, it's not that important. Or this, it's not that important. Yeah. When I'm at whiskey shows with the vice president of our group, he's the same thing. He cares about this and this and this. Do you like it? let's get down to, do you like this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's nice to have these people who push your buttons a little bit and kind of bring you on to what the general masses think is important, as opposed to the geek or the person trying to be too geeky, which is me. Let's get on to the individual distilleries, because this is a large portion of your book. So, and if I do the pages of it, I think it's 2/3. Yeah, we go what we've spoken to right now brings us to page 75 of almost 250 pages of it. So a lot of information on the individual distilleries. So we can't go through them all. We don't have the time for that. And although I'd talk your ear off and I'd love to hear about each one of them individually, I tried, for the moment anyways, not to read all of the chapters, and I haven't yet. I read them in order of the distilleries that I visited in Islay, in that order.
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't stop myself, so I read some of the other ones, which are among my very favorites that I didn't get to, which I'm very sorry of. But I do have a couple questions, and answer any of them, all of them, whatever you want. But these are the questions I came up with that are not specifically focused to the distilleries. So do you have a favorite creation story for an Islay distillery? That's one. Do you have a favorite comeback story for an Islay distillery? So for me, it's Bruichladdich. That's my favorite one, but maybe yours is different. How long do you think it takes for a name to be associated with a distillery for the general whiskey-loving public? So Bill Lumsden, Jim McEwan, and again, maybe it's reestablished with another distillery. How long does it take the personas to be attached to a distillery? So those three questions are general for any of them. Answer one or all, or none of them, and I'll go on to the next question if that's it.
Well, Bruichladdich also was for me a real joy and focal point, because I had been friends with Jim McEwan while he was at Bowmore for a number of years, and then of course he went to Bruichladdich from Bowmore. So for me that was, a lovely continuity, and I knew that it was his dream to see Bruichladdich, come back into production again. So that made it very, very emotional. But also when I was researching Ardbeg, and I heard, that Ardbeg was in quite a sorry state when it was acquired by LVMH, Glenmorangie. That also was very poignant, because, it had been brought back from, some of the buildings were derelict, etc., etc. So that's also very emotional.
Okay.
But because of Jim, Bruichladdich is the most evocative one.
Okay, good. And how long did it take it for him to be linked to Bruichladdich, and people maybe forget about Bowmore a little bit?
I think Jim was immediately a beacon of Bruichladdich, because he was already, well known as, a key person at Bowmore. So his Bowmore renown and fame then meant that he was immediately, recognizable figure.
And I'm sorry I never saw him. I hear stories and recounts of tastings that he does, and his boisterous self, and how he would just claim the room no matter who was in the room. So that type of personality. So I envy your time with him. So good job, sir. We talked about Ardbeg, so let's stick with Ardbeg. I wanted to thank you for the Islay creation myth as well, and talking about Shorty, because these are two things that I haven't really thought about for a little while, and you talk about that. So, and again, what was your intent? Let's start with that. When you go from chapter to chapter to chapter, distillery to distillery to distillery, what did you want the reader to be able to focus on or just be exposed to? What did you want for them when doing this?
Well, I really, really wanted that section of the book not to read like a brand directory, because for me, that was just a horror. I wanted every distillery not just to have, dates, key dates, and when this happened and when that happened. I wanted to try and get across, the character of the distillery, because to me, the distillery it's almost like a person. Each distillery has its own personality and characteristics, and some of them are much sort of grander and more sort of much bolder, flamboyant personalities. Some are more sort of restrained and discreet. And so I thought, well, how can I get that across? So partly through the architecture and the equipment they've got, but also the inhabitants, including, of course, Shorty the dog.
And he's ever present as well. He yes. keeps coming up on all the labels, and he's there, but I don't think of him all that often. So it was nice for you to bring that out and for us to remember it. The other thing is really neat. It was about the riveting and the welding of the stills, and you mentioned that previously. And when I was there, I'm sure I noticed. No, I didn't notice. I saw the stills, but I didn't notice it. And it's really neat that you were able to delve really deeply into certain things that others, me included, take for granted. Shorty would be one of them. The stills, the other. But you also had the chance to do some things that I wish I had. And here's a quote. If I could find it. Here we are. I had the opportunity to pry into several of the organ pine washbacks and compare different stages of fermentation. Now, you did this visually and to taste. And what gave you the idea to do the comparison to taste? And I'm wondering if it was very hard to convince them to lower the little taster into to bring it out for you so you could taste the difference. Because seeing the difference, and I love the visuals that you gave for it, but tasting it, I think, oh, that would have been cool. But spur of the moment situation, or was it born of conversations with the maltsters, the other people that were taking you around? Was it their idea, or did you just seize the moment, sir?
It was very much seize the moment, because I was going around with Colin, the distillery manager, and he was explaining that, this one is this many hours into fermentation, this one is that many hours. And I said, can you tell just from the aroma, pretty much at what stage it is? Because, in the still house, a lot of master distillers have said to me that, at a certain point, they know what's going on in the stills, because suddenly apples fill the still house, the aroma of apples. So we were talking about that, and I said, is it okay just to have a look at, the sort of degree of bubbling and foam and all the rest of it that's going on? And then I said to him, I wonder how the flavor is evolving at each point. And it was, I think, purely spontaneous. He said, oh, great idea. Let's try it. So I said, fantastic.
Thank you.
I'd never done that before.
Let's do
so that. It was really, really exciting.
Well, you took advantage of the situation. You seized the moment, sir, and I think that's very important in life. I think when we see something that is interesting, we say it and try to get other people to kind of help us out with it. And you were in the right place, and you had the right idea, the right frame of mind for it, I think.
Yes.
Also, well, that happened to me a little bit, but I think it's by design. When you go through the tours. So I'm going to grab a picture of this if we can. When we went to Bowmore, I had the chance to not Ardbeg. Sorry, this is all Ardbeg. I'm looking for the Bowmore where I was raking. I was on the malting floor, And we both had the same experience. You write of it in there. And I'm wondering how your lines were, because I was very disappointed with my lines. I was on there and I was raking maybe 5 minutes. So enough. My wife says I was out there too long because they offered and I jumped. I jumped.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, I want to do that. And I was raking, and theirs is from behind. So you're pulling from behind. How was your lines? Did they look okay?
Well, perhaps I was biased when I assessed my own work, but normally I'm very critical of my own work. I think for a complete beginner, they were reasonable, but I know that I would never get a job on the malting floor. Also, I mean, I was amazed that it's incredibly hard work dragging a plough behind you.
Yeah.
I didn't do it for that long, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And I was quite tired by the end of it. I mean, it's a heavy thing in itself. And then, you're pulling through the malt.
Yes, and
So,
your foot pushing into it, and you're losing traction at the same time. You don't think of that. So, yeah.
So I had, my admiration for the people on the malting floor really increased, because I thought not only do they have the knowledge of being able to, look at the floor and know when to do what, but also just physically, it's really hard work.
And I'm wondering if you had a little bit, I'm not going to say an epiphany, but I had a change in status for me. And I don't know if you had that yourself, of favorites going on the island the first time, second time, third time.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they changed over time, because for me, Bowmore was a great dram, and Bowmore Darkest, their 15-year-old, was one of my favorites for the very, very long time. But going there this time, it wasn't one of my top three. Ardbeg was one of my top three, but after my experience with the cask, so you pay the extra, so you go into the back and you can taste directly from the cask. I had this experience at 3 distilleries. So Bruichladdich was fantastic, so Bowmore and Ardbeg. But after that, the experience, and because of the person doing the experience or in charge of my 1.5 and 2 hours there, Bowmore is now just right at the top of the list. And I'm linking an experience to a whiskey, and when you're back there and you're getting them directly from the barrel, they're fantastic. They wouldn't pick a barrel that wasn't good. So I had these barrels and probably 4 or 5 so 13, 14 different barrels that we tasted from, all beautiful, fantastic. But for some reason, my experience at Bowmore elevated them so that now they're just forefront. Did that happen for you, where something changed because of the experience with the people there? And you had a lot of experiences there, sir.
I think so, because tasting in an aging warehouse, straight from the cask, if you tasted the same dram in the boardroom, it would not be the same experience.
No.
And I know that people might think, okay, well, it should, objectively, it should taste the same. But it's just the experience is different. And I agree with you. I mean, when I went into warehouse number 1 at Bowmore, first of all, that incredible aroma of sort of, slightly earthy, to me, it was Stilton cheese, which I love.
Oh, okay.
And just, the darkness, the rich, suffused air within the warehouse, because in that warehouse, it's only when the doors opened that there's any ventilation. So it's absolutely incredible and, really intense aroma. So that really heightens everything. And I think it's good just to, let go and let the experience, take over and not be and just be subjective and just let it be as personal as possible and really live it.
And some distilleries get that. Lefroy, actually, they get that, but it's not with the distillery and inside the distillery. It's your little flag that you go and you plant, and it links you to the place, and it links you to a time. And if you're having a fantastic moment, day, week, trip, whatever it is, it just cements that within your memory. I'm wondering if there's something that comes to the forefront for you. So for me, it was, again, at Bowmore, and you just described it very well. It was the darkest of them as well. Of all of the warehouses that we went into, that was the darkest, muskiest, and it seems authentic. I'm sorry, they're all authentic, but it seemed the most authentic. It's the mystique around it. It was for that. So that was the spot, the time on Islay. I don't think I'm going to forget.
Yeah.
Is there one of those for you, sir?
Well, definitely my personal sort of album of very special memories includes going into Bowmore Warehouse Number 1. Partly also, you feel the history, and when you know that it's the oldest aging warehouse. I think, well, definitely on Islay, but I'm not sure whether in Scotland. But anyway, it's got an incredible history. But also there've been other times, such as at Lefroy, for example, when and at Bowmore, when I've seen waves crashing and hitting the side of the aging warehouse. That to me is a really poignant memory and, an amazing vision.
Nice. Okay. That's great. Yeah. And you know what? I've had you on for 1 hour and 47 minutes, and I just looked at the time, and it feels like 20 minutes. It feels like a half an hour. The time has flown.
It has.
But I still have to ask, is there anything that we haven't spoken to that you would like to add? Something that maybe I cut you off, because I do that, because I talk all the time and talk too much. Is there something that you would like to add that we glossed over or rushed through, or I missed completely?
I think the future of Islay malts, because there's been a lot of discussion in the whiskey world about, is Campbelltown going to be the next area of excitement and focus? And I think, well, I hope it is an area of excitement. It's definitely an area of excitement and focus, but why not concurrently with Islay and the other regions of Scotland? Because, over the next few years, we will see more new distilleries opening and going into production on Islay. Mm-hmm. So the story is constantly evolving. And, the existing distilleries also, there will be changes of personnel and, changes of focus. So I think, I'd love to be able to update this book in a few years' time.
Edition 2 and 3 in 20 years.
Yes.
Oh, just keep going. And have them pay for it.
Yes.
Whatever. And and do Campbellton at the same time. You can do the exact same thing with Campbellton. And the history there, vast. Tons to research. Although it's a lot easier to hit the distilleries in one small little town than you already did. So you can walk to them all.
Yeah, exactly. That's why a book on Speyside is not as... It's a lot more challenging than Islay, just because of the sheer volume of distilleries. I
tried. I really did this summer. So great memories, but they all blend together. I think I need more time. I think I need years, actually.
Yes.
Truly, years to visit them all. And I admire the fact that you've had the chance to do so many of them. Well, I guess that's it. That's all the time we have today, Whiskey brothers, sisters, and friends. It's been a fantastic morning for me. Thanks to our listeners who joined us today, and most of you who are going to join us in the future. Very special thanks to Ian Wisniewski here. Pronounce your name for me, because there's a Z sound in there. I'm not getting.
Wisniewski.
Wisniewski.
Perfect.
Am I close? Wisniewski. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ian. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
I've had a wonderful time. And as you say, it's just flown by. And chatting about a subject that we both love is a real joy.
It is. I could do this for hours, but we're gonna lose you. That's okay. Thank you. As a final note, if you don't want to miss a minute of any of these programs, episodes, click like, subscribe. But always, and for me, here's the good company. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Here's the good whiskey, which I had today, and it was just the basic Laddie 10. It was just basic Laddie 10. Made me very happy. Here's the good conversation, and here's to seeing you all in the future. Sláinte.
Slanja.
Thank you, sir. And that should be that. I'm trying to end the session. There.